Of course, let me know if it, it's too loud or it needs to be raised volume. So now, we are doing commentary. If you guys don't want commentary, there's a link down below if you want to watch it without me talking or responding to stuff. I know that was an issue with people last time, so I wanted to make that very clear. Hello, hello. Hey, everyone, what's going on, man? Talk it up, I don't care. All right, well, good. I think I might get rid of the goals so that way it's not in the way. Hey, Colorful, what's up, man? So let's get rid of these goals so that way they're not in the way, but I will keep up my top overlay thing. Am I doing the Minecraft stream at 8? Yep. 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central. Here we go. So again, if you don't want commentary, link down below in the description.
The talk that we had planned. But we do have some super exciting news about PS5, and who better to bring that to you than the one and only Mark Cerny. Without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jim.
GTO's started getting messing through. You're good, man.
There will be lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today, I want to talk a bit about our goals for the PlayStation 5 hardware and how they influenced the development of the console. I think you all know I'm a big believer in console generations. Once every 5 or 6 or 7 years, a console
How's our day? Our day's going. My morning's been going pretty good.
There's a lot of learning by the game developers, you guys? Hopefully not too overwhelming. And soon there's games that could never have been created before.
I'm going to raise the volume up a tad.
It used to be that as a console designer, you'd somehow intuit what would be the best set of capabilities for the new console, and then build it in complete secrecy. For the PlayStation consoles, that period lasted through PlayStation 3, a powerful and groundbreaking console, but also one that caused quite a lot of heartache, as it was initially difficult to develop games for.
At least they admit it.
Starting with PlayStation 4, we've taken a different approach, roughly centered around 3 principles. The first of these is listening to the developers, which is to say that a lot of what we put into a console derives directly from the needs and aspirations of the game creators. We definitely do have some ideas of our own, but at the core of our philosophy for designing consoles is that game players are here for the fantastic games, which is to say that game creators matter. Anything we can do to make life easier for the game creators or help them realize their dreams, we will do. So about once every 2 years, I take a tour of the industry. I go to the various developers and publishers, sit down, and discuss how they're doing with the current consoles and what they'd like to see in future consoles. This requires weeks on the road, as reaching the bulk of the game creators involves talking to well over 100 people at something like 24 publishers and developers. And it is incredibly valuable. By the way, the feature most requested by the developers, that was an SSD, which we were very happy to put in the hardware, but a lot of problem solving was required. I'll be doing a deep dive on the SSD and surrounding systems later on in this talk.
PlayStation has the best games. Honestly, they do.
It's also key to make a generational leap while keeping the console sufficiently familiar to game developers. I think about this in terms of balancing evolution and revolution. Now, with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, the target was a revolution each time with a brand new feature set. That was great in many ways, but time for the developers to get up and running got longer with each console. In the past, I've called this time to triangle. Here's what I had for those 3 consoles. To be clear, I'm not talking about time to make a game. Developers will be ambitious, and it may take them 6 years or so to realize their vision. What I'm talking about is that dead time before graphics and other aspects of game development are up and running, and trying to minimize that. On the other hand, if we're trying to reduce that dead time to 0, that means the hardware architecture can't change at all. We're handcuffed. We need to judge for each feature what value it adds and whether it's worth the increase in developer time needed to support it. So with PlayStation 4, we were able to strike a pretty good balance between performance and familiarity. We got required learning back to PlayStation 1 levels. With PS5, the GPU was definitely the area we felt the most tension between adding new features and keeping a familiar programming model. Ultimately, I think we've ended up with something under a month of getting up to speed. That feels like we're striking about the right balance. I'll go into a bit more detail later
Microsoft's
today
inferior in
about
many
our
ways. You have to
philosophy
control
with
way
the
better in terms
GPU
of quality
and the
material.
specific feature set that
I feel like
resulted from it.
their recent ones, I don't really
It's
like the
also very
plasticky feel though.
important for us
But I guess
as
that's
the
kind of the same
hardware
with
team to find
PlayStation.
new dreams, by which I mean something other than CPU performance, GPU performance, and the amount
Okay,
of RAM.
Steven,
The
I'm
increase
really
in
working on
graphics
trying to get you
performance over the past 2
untimed out. I have
decades
no
has been
idea why you
astonishing,
did
but
that.
there are other areas in which we can innovate and provide significant value to the game creators, and through them, the players. That's why the SSD was very much on our list of directions to explore, regardless of what came out of the conversations with game developers and publishers. The biggest feature in this category is
Xbox
the
League controls
custom
the best. I
engine
really
for
want the new
audio.
version.
That's today's final topic. The push for vastly improved audio, and in particular 3D audio, isn't something that came out of the developer meetings. It's much more the case that we had a dream of what might be possible 5 years from now, and then worked out a number of steps we could take to set us on that path. So here again are the 3 principles, the first being enabling the desires of developers to drive the hardware design. To me, the SSD really is the key to the next generation. It's a game changer. And it was the #1 ask from developers for PlayStation 5. As in, we know it's probably impossible.
3D audio,
but
hell yeah,
can
better
we
horror
put
experiences.
an
Oh
SSD
dear
in?
God.
That was a discussion we were also having internally. It was clear that the presence of a hard drive in every PlayStation 4 was having a positive impact. A lot of things that would simply have
believe
been
it is, Irvin.
impossible at Blu-ray disc speeds were now possible. At the same time, though, in 2015 and 2016, when we were having these conversations, developers were already banging up against the limits of the hard drive, and a lot of developer time was being spent designing around slow load speeds.
Let me see.
I want to focus in on just one number here, which is how long it takes to load a
I'm hoping,
gigabyte
man. I'm
of
hoping we
data
do see it.
from a hard drive. The difficulty being that hard drives are neither particularly fast nor flexible. If all your data is in one block, which is frankly not very likely, you can load 50 to 100 megabytes a second, depending on where the data is located on the hard drive. Let's assume it's on the outer edge, which means loading a gigabyte takes 10 seconds. If you compress your game packages, you can fit more data on the
There you
Blu-ray
are.
disk and also effectively boost your hard drive read speed by the compression ratio. We support zlib decompression on PlayStation 4 that gets you something like 50% more data.
Okay,
on the
Steven,
disk and
just
50%
be
higher
careful with the
effective
comment. I don't know.
speed.
It's been acting up.
Unfortunately, though,
I'm
it's
not sure.
highly likely
It's
that your
new with
data
me.
is scattered around in various
So
files
just
on the hard drive,
Be careful.
as well as sourced from multiple locations within those files. So lots of seeks are needed at 2 to 50-ish milliseconds each. My rule of thumb is that the hard drive is spending 2/3 of its time seeking and only 1/3 of its time actually loading data. Putting all of that together, a gigabyte is very roughly 20 seconds to load from a hard drive. Now, a gigabyte is not much data. Games are using 5 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on PlayStation 4, so boot times and load times can get pretty grim. Or to put that differently, as a player, you wait for the game to boot, wait for the game to load, wait for the level to reload every time you die, and you wait for what is euphemistically called fast travel. And all of that leads to the dream. What if we could have not just an SSD, but a blindingly fast SSD? If we could load 5 gigabytes a second from it, what would change? Now, SSDs are completely
lot would
different from
change,
hard
actually.
drives. They don't have seeks as such. If you have a 5 gigabyte a second SSD, you can read data from 1,000 different locations in that second, pretty much at speed. As for time to load a gigabyte, this is next gen we're talking about, so memory is bigger. Instead, we should be asking how long to load 2 gigabytes. And the answer is about 1/4 of a second. I mean, that's amazing. We're talking 2 orders of magnitude, meaning very roughly 100 times faster. Which means at 5 gigabytes a second for the SSD, the potential is that the game boots in a second. There are no load screens. The game just fades down while loading a half dozen gigabytes and fades back up again. Same for a reload. You're immediately back in the action after you die. And fast travel becomes so fast it's blink and you miss it. As game creators, we go from trying to distract the player from how long fast travel is taking, like those Spider-Man subway rides, to being so blindingly fast that we might even have to slow that transition down. Pretty cool, right? But for me, this is not the primary reason to change from a hard drive to an SSD. The primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD is that it gives the game designer freedom. Or to put that
Series
differently,
X
with a hard
switches
drive,
like crazy
the
fast.
20 seconds that it takes to load a gigabyte can sabotage the game that the developer is trying to create.
It's over
I think
9,000.
almost all of us in the room have experienced this, maybe in different ways. Say we're making an adventure game and we have 2 rich environments where we each want enough textures and models to fill memory, which you can do as long as you have a long staircase or elevator ride or a windy corridor where you can ditch the old assets and then take 30 seconds or so to load the new assets. Having a 30-second elevator
Voice in my
ride
head
is
telling me to leave
a
the live
little
stream, come
extreme.
back to see
More
it.
realistically, we
You could
probably
definitely
chunk
do
the
that.
world
No
into
harm, no
a
foul in
number
that.
of smaller pieces, and then do some calculations with sight lines and run speeds, like we did for Haven City when we were making Jack
But
2.
I'm a
The
huge
game is
tech guy,
20 years
so
old,
I want to
but
know the
not
ins and
much
outs
has
of
changed since
everything.
then. All those twisty passages are there for a reason. There's a whole subset of level design dedicated to this sort of work, but
Oh, yeah,
still,
for sure.
it's a giant distraction for a team that just wants to make their game. So when I talked about the dream of an SSD, part of the reason for that 5 gigabyte a second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in,
We'll see you later, man.
what if the SSD is so fast that as the player is turning around, it's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second? If you figure that it takes half a second to turn, that's 4 gigabytes of compressed data you can load. That sounds about right for next gen. Anyway, back to the hard drive. Another strategy for increasing effective read speed is to make big sequential chunks of data. For example, we might group all the data together for each city block. That removes most of the seeks, and the streaming gets faster. But there's a downside too, which is that frequently used data is included in many chunks and therefore is on the hard drive many times.
I flew one earlier. It's pretty fun.
Strategy, and though it works very well for increasing the streaming speed, there's a massive duplication as a result. Some of the objects like mailboxes or news racks are on the hard drive 400 times. What I'm describing here are things that cramp a creative director's style. Either level design gets a little bit boring in places, or the data is duplicated so many times that it no longer fits on the Blu-ray disc. And you end up with hard limits on the player's run speed or driving speed. The player can't go faster than the load speed from the hard drive. And finally, I'm sure many of you have noticed that after a patch download, the PlayStation 4 will sometimes take a long time to install the patch. That's because when just part of a file has been changed, the new data can be downloaded pretty quickly. But before the game boots up, a brand new file has to be constructed that includes the changed portion. Otherwise, every change would add a seek or 2. Even so, you can occasionally see this happening on game titles. They start to hitch once they get patched enough. With an SSD, though, no seeks, so no need to make brand new files with the changes incorporated into them, which means no installs as you know them today. There's yet one more benefit, which is that system memory can be used much more efficiently. On PlayStation 4, game data on the hard drive feels very distant and difficult to use. By the time you realize you need a piece of data, it's much too late to go out and load it. So system memory has to contain all of the data that could be used in the next 30 seconds or so of gameplay. That means a lot of the 8 gigabytes of system memory is idle. It's just waiting there to be potentially used. On PlayStation 5, though, the SSD is very close to being like more RAM. Typically, it's fast enough that when you realize you need a piece of data, you can just load it from the SSD and use it. There's no need to have lots of data parked in system memory waiting to potentially be used. A different way of saying that is that most of RAM is working on the game's behalf. This is one of the reasons that 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 feels right for PlayStation 5. The presence of the SSD reduces the need for a massive intergenerational
We probably are,
increase
honestly.
in size. So back to the dream of the SSD. Here's the set of targets. Boot the game in a second. No load screens. Design freedom, meaning no twisty passages or long corridors. More game on the disk and more game on the SSD. And finally, those patch installs go away. The reality, though, is that the SSD is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of places where bottlenecks can occur in between the SSD and the game code that uses the data. You can see this on PlayStation 4. If I use an SSD with 10 times the speed of a standard hard drive, I probably see only double the loading speed, if that. For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that the SSD itself be 100 times faster. It was that game loads and streaming would be 100 times faster. So every single potential bottleneck needed to be addressed. And there are a lot of them. Let's look at check-in and what happens when its overhead gets 100 times larger. Conceptually, check-in is a pretty simple process. Data is loaded into system memory from the hard drive or SSD. It's examined. A few values are tweaked to check it in, and then it's moved to its final location. At the SSD speeds we're talking about, that last part, moving the data, meaning copying it from one location to another, takes roughly an entire next-gen CPU core. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If all the overheads get 100 times larger, that will cripple the frame rate as soon as the player moves, and that massive stream of data starts coming off the SSD. So to solve all of that, we built a lot of custom hardware, namely a custom flash controller and a number of custom units in our main chip. The flash controller in the SSD was designed for smooth and bottleneck-free operation, but also with games in mind. For example, there are 6 levels of priority when reading from the SSD. Priority is very important.
True,
you can imagine the player heading into some new location in the world and the game requesting a few gigabytes of textures.
Good on themselves.
And while those textures are being loaded, an enemy is shot and has to speak a few dying words. Having multiple priority levels lets the audio for those dying words get loaded immediately. On one side, that flash controller connects to the actual flash dies that supply the storage. To reach our bandwidth target of 5 gigabytes a second, we ended up with a 12-channel interface.
VR,
8 channels
like a
wouldn't
deep,
be enough.
full dive VR.
The resulting bandwidth we've achieved is actually 5.5 gigabytes a second. With a 12-channel interface, the most natural size that emerges for an SSD is 825 gigabytes. The key question for us was, is that enough? I mean, it's tempting to add more, but Flash certainly doesn't come
so they
cheap.
barely got
We have a
past the minimum of
responsibility
what
to
they
our
wanted to
gaming
do
audience to be
with
cost-effective with regards to what we put
parts.
in the console. Ultimately, we resolved this question by looking at the play patterns of a broad range of gamers. We examined the specific games that they were playing over the course of a weekend or a week or a month, and whether that set of games would fit properly on the SSD. We were able to establish that the friction caused by reinstalls or re-downloads would be quite low, and so we locked in on that 825 gigabyte size, while also preparing multiple strategies so that those who want more storage can add it. I'll go through the details in a moment.
Uh-oh.
Back to the flash controller. On the other side, it connects to our main custom chip via 4 lanes of Gen 4 PCIe. And inside the main custom chip is a pretty hefty unit dedicated to I/O. Before we talk about what that does, let's talk compression for a moment. PlayStation 4 used zlib as its compression format. We decided to use it again on PlayStation 5, but on my 2017 tour of developers, I learned about a new format called Kraken from Rad Game Tools. It's like zlib's smarter cousin. Simple, similar types of algorithms, but about 10% better compression, which is pretty big.
It did kill the Vita, but the Vita was really good, actually.
On the UHD Blu-ray disc or on the SSD. Kraken had only been out for a year, but it was already becoming a de facto industry standard. Half of the teams I talked to were either using it or getting ready to evaluate it. So we hustled and built a custom decompressor into the I/O unit, one capable of handling over 5 gigabytes of Kraken format input data a second. After decompression, that typically becomes 8.
No, he has an audience there,
but
because of the virus, there are people seated 1 seat away from each other.
As 22 gigabytes a second if the data happened to compress particularly well. By the way, in terms of performance, that custom decompressor equates to 9 of our Zen 2 cores. That's what it would take to decompress the Kraken stream with a conventional CPU. There's a lot more in the custom I/O unit, including a dedicated DMA controller.
I was
the
thinking
game
so
can
too,
direct
but
exactly
I see
where
one of them
it
moving
wants to
around a
send
little
the
bit.
data coming off
they
of the
might be.
SSD. This equates to another Zen 2 core or two in terms of its copy performance. Its primary purpose is to remove check-in as a bottleneck. There's 2 dedicated I/O coprocessors and a large RAM pool. These aren't Zen 2 cores. They're there principally to direct the variety of custom hardware around them. One of the coprocessors is dedicated to SSD I/O. This lets us bypass traditional file I/O and its bottlenecks when reading from the SSD. The other is responsible for memory mapping, which I know doesn't sound like anything related to the SSD, but a lot of developers map and remap memory as part of file I/O, and this too can become a bottleneck. There are coherency engines to assist the coprocessors. Coherency comes up a lot in places. Probably the biggest coherency issue is stale data in the GPU caches. Flushing all of the GPU caches whenever the SSD is read is an unattractive option. It could really hurt the GPU performance. So we've implemented a gentler way of doing things, where the coherency engines inform the GPU of the overwritten address ranges, and custom scrubbers in several dozen GPU caches do pinpoint evictions of just those address ranges. The best thing is, as a game developer, when you read from the SSD, you don't need to know any of this. You don't even need to know that your data is compressed. You just indicate what data you'd like to read from your original uncompressed file and where you'd like to put it, and the whole process of loading it happens invisibly to you and at very high speed. Back to the dream. Thanks to all of that surrounding hardware, our 5.5 gigabytes a second really should translate into something like 100 times faster I/O than PS4 and allow the dream of no load screens and super fast streaming to become a reality. Ooh. Having said that, expandability of our SSD is going to be quite important. Flash is costly, and you may very well want to add storage to whatever we put in the console. Now,
going to be a tiny
the
drive.
kind of storage you need depends on how you're going to use it. If you have an extensive PlayStation 4 library and you'd like to take advantage of backwards compatibility to play those games on PlayStation 5, then a large external hard drive is ideal. You can leave your games on the hard drive and play them directly from there, thus saving the pricier SSD storage for your PlayStation 5 titles, or you can copy your active PlayStation 4 titles to the SSD. If your purpose in adding more storage is to play PlayStation 5 titles, though, ideally you would add to your SSD storage. We will be supporting certain M2 SSDs. These are internal drives that you can get on the open market and install in a bay in the PlayStation 5. As for which ones we support and when, I'll get to that in a moment. They connect through the custom I/O unit just like our SSD does, so they can take full advantage of the decompression, I/O coprocessors, and all the other features I was talking about. Here's the catch, though. That commercial drive has to be at least as fast as ours. Games that rely on the speed of our SSD need to work flawlessly with any M2 drive.
This is where the money
When I
comes
gave
in.
the Wired interview last year, I said that the PlayStation 5 SSD was faster than anything available on PC. At the time, commercial M2 drives used PCIe 3.0, and 4 lanes of that cap out at 3.5 gigabytes a second. In other words, no PCIe 3.0 drive can hit the required spec. M2 drives with PCIe 4.0 are now out in the market. We're getting samples and seeing 4 or 5 gigabytes a second from them.
Wow.
By year's end, I expect there will be drives that saturate 4.0 and support 7 gigabytes a second. Having said that, we are comparing apples and oranges, though, because that commercial M2 drive will have its own architecture, its own flash controller, and so on. For example, the NVMe specification lays out a priority scheme for requests that the M2 drives can use. And that scheme is pretty nice, but it only has 2 true priority levels. Our drive supports 6. We can hook up a drive with only 2 priority levels, definitely, but our custom I/O unit has to arbitrate the extra priorities rather than the M2 drive's flash controller. And so the M2 drive needs a little extra speed to take care of issues arising from the different approach. That commercial drive also needs to physically fit inside of the bay we created in PlayStation 5 for M2 drives. unlike internal hard drives, there's unfortunately no standard for the height of an M2 drive. And some M2 drives have giant heat sinks. In fact, some of them even have their own fans. Right now, we're getting M2 drive samples and benchmarking them in various ways. When games hit beta as they get ready for
I imagine
PlayStation
it will
5
be
launch
urban,
at
actually.
year-end, we'll also be doing some compatibility testing to make sure that the architecture of particular M2 drives isn't too foreign for the games to handle. Once we've done that compatibility testing, we should be able to start letting you know which drives will physically fit and which drive samples have benchmarked appropriately high in our testing. It would be great if that happened by launch, but it's likely to be a bit past it. So please hold off on getting that M2 drive until you hear from us. Okay, back to our principles. Balancing evolution and revolution is the second of them. This was definitely a recurring theme with the GPU. We need new GPU features and capabilities. If we only have more performance, it's not really a new generation of console. Of course, many of these capabilities result in more performance. That's part of why a PlayStation 5 teraflop is more powerful than a PlayStation 4 teraflop. But we aren't just looking for the performance. We also need the ability to do something with the GPU that could not have been done before. And we need higher performance per watt. Every time we double the performance of some GPU component, we don't want to find out we've doubled the power consumed and the heat produced. But at the same time, we have to make sure the GPU can run PS4 games, and we have to ensure that the architecture is easy for the developers to adopt.
Will Fortnite, not
now,
Will Fortnite. Oh,
backwards
yeah,
compatibility was handled masterfully by AMD. They treated it
Fortnite
as a
should be
key
live around that
need
time,
throughout
so
the design
we'll probably
process.
see that.
As our solution
Fortnite
to adding new
pretty quick.
features without blindsiding developers,
Netflix
we made
TV.
sure that if there were new significant features, it would be optional to use them. The GPU supports ray tracing, but you don't have to use ray tracing to make your game. The GPU supports primitive shaders,
See you
but
later,
you can
man.
release your first game on PlayStation 5 without making any use of them. Before I get into the capabilities of the GPU, I'd like to make clear 2 points that can be quite confusing. First, we have a custom AMD GPU based on their RDNA 2 technology. What does that mean? AMD is continuously improving and revising their tech. For RDNA 2, their goals were, roughly speaking, to reduce power consumption by re-architecting the GPU to put data close to where it's needed, to optimize the GPU for performance, and to add a new, more advanced feature set. But that feature set is malleable, which is to say that we have our own needs for PlayStation.
The brand new
and that
AMD
can
hardware is
factor
actually
into what the AMD
stupid good.
roadmap becomes.
I really can't
So
wait to see these in
collaboration is born. If we bring concepts to AMD that are felt to be widely useful, then they can be adopted into RDNA 2 and used broadly, including in PC GPUs. If the ideas are sufficiently specific to what we're trying to accomplish, like the GPU cache scrubbers I was talking about, then they end up being just for us. If you see a similar discrete GPU available as a PC card at roughly the same time as we release our console, that means our collaboration with AMD succeeded in producing technology useful in both worlds. It doesn't mean that we as Sony simply incorporated the PC part into our console. This continuous improvement in AMD technology means it's dangerous to rely on teraflops as an absolute indicator of performance, and CU count should be avoided as well. In the case of CPUs, we all understand this. The PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 each have
I feel like this
CPUs,
is leading
but
up
we
to
never
the
think that
PlayStation
meant
5
the
not being as
capabilities and
powerful as
performance
the
are
X,
equal.
Series X.
It's the same for CUs. For one thing, they've been getting much larger over time. Adding new features means adding lots of transistors. In fact, the transistor count for a PlayStation 5 CU is 62% larger than the transistor count for a PlayStation 4 CU. Second, the PlayStation 5 GPU is backwards compatible with PlayStation 4. What does that mean? One way you can achieve backwards compatibility is to put the previous console's chipset in the new console, like we did with some PlayStation 3s, but that's of course extremely expensive. A better way is to incorporate any differences in the previous console's logic into the new console's custom chips, meaning that even as the technology evolves, the logic and feature set that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro titles rely on is still available in backwards compatibility modes.
So what about
One advantage of this strategy is that once backwards compatibility is in the console, it's in. It's not as if a cost down will remove backwards compatibility like it did on PlayStation 3. Achieving this unification of functionality took years of efforts by AMD, as any roadmap advancement creates a potential divergence in logic. Running PS4 and PS4 titles at boosted frequencies has also added complexity. The boost is truly massive this time around, and some game code just can't handle it. Testing has to be done on a title-by-title basis. Results are excellent, though. We recently took a look at the top 100 PlayStation 4 titles as ranked by playtime, and we're expecting almost all of them to be playable at launch on PlayStation 5. With regards to new features, as I said, our strategy was to try to break new ground, but at the same time not to require use of the new GPU capabilities. For more than a decade, GPUs have imposed a restriction on game engines. Software handles vertex processing, but for the most part, dedicated hardware is responsible for the triangles and other geometry that the vertices form. That means it's not possible to do even basic optimizations, such as aborting processing of a vertex if all geometry that uses it is off-screen. PlayStation 5 has a new unit called the Geometry Engine, which brings handling of triangles and other primitives under full programmatic control. As a game developer, you're free to ignore its existence and use the PlayStation 5 GPU as if it were no more capable than the PS4 GPU, or you can use this new intelligence in various ways. Simple usage could be performance optimization, such as removing backfaced or off-screen vertices and triangles. More complex usage involves something called primitive shaders, which allow the game to synthesize geometry on the fly as it's being rendered. It's a brand new capability. Using primitive shaders on PlayStation 5 will allow for a broad variety of techniques, including smoothly varying level of detail, addition of procedural detail to close-up objects, and improvements to particle effects
supposedly
and other
it's
visual
around
special
holiday
effects.
this year.
Another major new
They say it's
feature
still on
of our
track,
custom
no issues because of the virus.
RDNA2-based GPU is
So
ray
they say
tracing,
they're still
using
on
the same
track,
strategy as
but
AMD's upcoming
officially there are
PC
no
GPUs.
dates, but
The
unofficially
CUs
they've
contain
said
a new
holiday.
specialized unit called the
Yep,
intersection
same with
engine,
Xbox.
which can calculate the intersection of rays with boxes and triangles. To use
No
the
one has
intersection
announced
engine,
a
first you
specific
build
date.
what is called an
We'll
acceleration
probably hear it
structure.
around summertime.
It's data in RAM that contains all of your geometry. There's a specific set of formats you can use. They're variations on the same BVH concept. Then, in your shader program, you use a new instruction that asks the intersection engine to check a ray against the BVH. While the intersection engine is processing the requested ray triangle or ray box intersections,
they look
the
real.
shaders are free to do other work. Having said that, the ray tracing instruction is pretty memory intensive, so it's a good mix with logic heavy
Isn't
code.
PS5 related in December?
There's of course no need
yeah,
to
supposed
use
to be
ray
around
tracing.
November.
PS4 graphics engines will run just fine on PlayStation 5, but it presents an opportunity for those interested.
Wow, they have ray tracing.
I'm thinking it'll take less than 1 million rays a second to have a big impact on audio. That should be enough for audio occlusion and some reverb calculations. With a bit more of the GPU invested in ray tracing,
I think around
it should
November,
be possible to
December,
do some very nice global illumination. Having said that, adding ray-traced shadows and reflections to a traditional graphics engine could easily take hundreds of millions of rays a second, and full ray tracing could take billions. How far can we go? I'm starting to get quite bullish. I've already seen a PlayStation 5 title that's successfully using ray tracing-based reflections in complex animated scenes with only modest costs. Another set of issues for the GPU involved size and frequency. How big do we make the GPU, and what frequency do we run it at? This is a balancing act. The chip has a cost, and there's a cost for whatever we use to supply that chip with power and to cool it. In general, I like running the GPU at higher frequency. Let me show you why. Here's two possible configurations for a GPU roughly of the level of the PlayStation 4 Pro. This is a thought experiment. Don't take these configurations too seriously. If you just calculate teraflops, you get the same number. But actually, the performance is noticeably different because teraflops is defined as the computational capability of the vector ALU. That's just one part of the GPU. There are a lot of other units. And those other units all run faster when the GPU frequency is higher. At 33% higher frequency, rasterization goes 33% faster. Processing the command buffer goes that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth, and so on. About the only downside is that system memory is 33% further away in terms of cycles. But the large number of benefits more than counterbalance that. As a friend of mine says, a rising tide lifts all boats. Also, it's easier to fully use 36 CUs in parallel than it is to fully use 48 CUs. When triangles are small, it's much harder to fill all those CUs with useful work.
A lot of this information makes me wonder, he has to be reading some kind of key card.
Assuming you can handle
that's
the
a
result
lot
of
of
power
information
and
to
heat
just kind of
which frankly, we haven't always done the best job.
Remember off the top of
Part
your
of the
head.
reason for that is, historically, our process for setting CPU and GPU frequencies has relied on some heavy-duty guesswork with regards to how much electrical power games will consume and how much heat will be produced as a result inside of the console. Power consumption varies a lot from game to game. When I play God of War on my PS4 Pro, I know the power consumption is high just by the fan noise. But power isn't simply about engine quality. It's about the minutiae of what's being displayed and how. It's counterintuitive, but processing dense geometry typically consumes less power than processing simple geometry, which is, I suspect, why Horizon's map screen, with its low triangle count, makes my PS4 Pro heat up so
there's no
much.
way he could.
Our process on previous consoles has been to try to guess what the maximum power consumption during the entire console lifetime might be, which is to say, the worst case scene in the worst case game, and prepare a cooling solution that we think will be quiet at that power level. If we get it right, fan noise is minimal. If we get it wrong, the console will be quite loud for the higher power games, and there's even a chance that it might overheat and shut down if we misestimate power too badly. PlayStation 5 is especially challenging because the CPU supports 256-bit native instructions that consume a lot of power. These are great here and there, but presumably only minimally used. Or are they? If we plan for major 256-bit instruction usage, we need to set the CPU clock substantially lower or noticeably increase the size of the power supply and fan. So, after much discussion, we decided to go with a very different direction on PlayStation 5. We built a GPU with 36 CUs. Mind you, RDNA2 CUs are large. Each has 62% more transistors than the CUs we were using on PlayStation 4. So if we compare transistor counts, 36 RDNA2 CUs equates to roughly 58 PlayStation 4 CUs. It is a fairly sizable GPU. Then we went with a variable frequency strategy for PlayStation 5, which is to say we continuously run the GPU and CPU in boost mode. We supply a generous amount of electrical power and then increase the frequency of GPU and CPU until they reach the capabilities of the system's cooling solution. It's a completely different paradigm. Rather than running at constant frequency and letting power vary based on the workload, we run at essentially constant power and let the frequency vary based on the workload. We then tackled the engineering challenge of a cost-effective and high-performance cooling solution designed for that specific power level. In some ways, it becomes a simpler problem because there are no more unknowns. There's no need to guess what power consumption the worst-case game might have. As for the details of the cooling solution, we're saving them for our teardown. I think you'll be quite happy with what the engineering team came up with. So, how fast can we run the GPU and CPU with this strategy? The simplest approach would be to look at the actual temperature of the silicon die and throttle the frequency on that basis. But that won't work. It fails to create a consistent PlayStation 5 experience. It wouldn't do to run a console slower simply because it was in a hot room.
What if it's an Android from the
So
Dragon Ball
rather
series?
than look at the actual temperature of the silicon die, we look at the activities that the GPU and CPU are performing and set the frequencies on that basis, which makes everything deterministic and repeatable. While we're at it, we also use AMD's Smart Shift technology and send any unused power from the CPU to the GPU so it can squeeze out a few more pixels. The benefits of this strategy are quite large. Running a GPU at 2 gigahertz was looking like an unreachable target with the old fixed frequency strategy. With this new paradigm, we're able to run way over that. In fact, we have to cap the GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can guarantee that the on-chip logic operates properly. 36 CUs at 2.23 gigahertz is 10.3 teraflops. And
Damn.
we expect the GPU to spend most of its time at or close to that frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at 3 gigahertz was causing headaches with the old strategy.
I would say it's
But
about
now
right
we
or-
can run
yeah.
it as high as 3.5 gigahertz. In fact, it spends most of its time at that frequency. That doesn't mean all games will be running at 2.23 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz. When that worst case game arrives, it will run at a lower clock speed, but not too much lower. To reduce power by 10%, it only takes a couple of percent reduction in frequency, so I'd expect any downclocking to be pretty minor. All things considered, the change to a variable frequency approach will show significant gains for PlayStation gamers. The final of our 3 principles was about finding new dreams. It's important for us on the hardware team to find new ways to expand or deepen gaming, and that's what led us to a focus on 3D audio. As players, we experience the game through the visuals, through audio, and through the feedback we receive from the
How you
controller,
report.
such as rumble or haptics. Personally, I feel a game is just dead without audio. Visuals are, of course, important, but the impact of audio is huge as well. At the same time, the audio team on a game project has to do a lot with a little. For example, on PlayStation 4, there's fierce competition for the Jaguar CPU cores. Audio typically ends up getting just a fraction of a core. That's not much of a computational resource, particularly when you consider that the visuals run at 30 or 60 frames a second, but audio processing needs to happen at almost 200 times a second. So, it's been tough going making forward progress on audio with PlayStation 4, particularly when
price.
PlayStation 3 was such a
Ain't no one
beast
giving
when
no
it came
prices.
to audio.
They're waiting on Xbox.
The SPUs in Cell were almost a perfect device for audio rendering. Simple pipelined algorithms could really take advantage of asynchronous DMA and frequently reached 100% utilization of the floating point unit. There's unfortunately nothing comparable on PlayStation 4. Probably the most dramatic progress in the PlayStation 4 generation has been with virtual reality. The PSVR hardware has its own audio unit. It supports about 50 pretty decent 3D sound sources. And this provided a hint as to where we could go with audio, as well as some valuable experience. Not to oversimplify, but here were our goals for audio on PlayStation 5. The first goal was great audio for everyone, not just VR users or soundbar owners or headphone users. That meant audio had to be part of the console. It couldn't be a peripheral. The second goal was to support hundreds of sound sources. We didn't want developers to have
Who
to
made
pick
this
and choose
PowerPoint?
what sounds would get 3D effects and which wouldn't. We wanted every sound in the game to have dimensionality.
I think around
And
500,
finally, we
600
wanted to
Republic
really
calls.
take on the challenges of presence and locality. Now, when we say presence, we mean the feeling that you're actually there. You've entered the matrix. It's not, of course, something we thought we could perfectly achieve, but the idea was that if we stopped using just a rain sound and instead used lots of 3D audio sources for raindrops hitting the ground at all sorts of locations around you, then at some point your brain would take a leap and you'd begin to have this feeling of real presence inside the virtual world of the game. This has the capacity to affect your appreciation of the game, just like music in a game does.
I think a lot of people
The
can't.
concept
if
of
it's $600,
locality
but
is
they
simple.
might release
It's just
both,
your sense of where the audio is coming from.
two systems
to the
that
right of
launch
you,
at the same
behind
time.
you, above you.
The
This
lower
can
end and the
immerse
higher
you
end
further
one.
in the game, and it can also directly enhance the gameplay. To use Dead Space as an example, I know, old school, you're
Oh, Dead
fighting
Space.
enemies in fairly dark, spooky locations. Back in the day, if you played the game using the TV speakers, you could tell that there was one last enemy growling and hunting you down, but it was difficult to tell quite where that enemy was. With headphones, you could tell that the enemy was somewhere on the right, which let you deduce, if you couldn't see it, that it must be somewhere behind and to your right. But with 3D audio with good locality, the idea is you know the enemy is precisely there, and you turn and you take it out. So, how do we know where a sound is coming from in the
I
first
miss Dead
place?
Space, man.
Well, all those bumps and folds in the ear have a meaning, evolutionarily speaking. Based on what direction the sound is coming from, sound waves bounce around inside
I
the
feel like
ear,
they took
there's
a
some
number
constructive
out of
and
ASMR
destructive interference, and
and
the
they
result
put it
is a
into their
change
game.
in volume.
Into their
The phase of the
console.
sound also shifts, depending on what path the sound wave took to reach the ear canal. These volume changes and phase shifts are different for each direction and also vary depending on the frequency of the sound. Head size and head shape also impact the sound in a similar fashion. The way that the sound changes, based on direction and frequency, can be encoded in a table called the Head-Related Transfer Function, or HRTF. Here's part of one. The vertical axis is the frequency, the horizontal axis is the direction, front, back, left, right, and the color gives the degree of attenuation of the sound at that frequency. The HRTF is as unique to an individual as a fingerprint is. In fact, you're looking at mine right now.
People.
Here's how we measure an HRTF. We've taken hundreds of people through this process. We put a microphone in the subject's left and right ear canals, and then sit the subject down in the middle of an array of 22 speakers. We then play an audio sweep from each speaker as we rotate the subject. In the course of 10 or 20 minutes, we're able to sample the HRTF at over 1,000 locations. Using an HRTF when rendering audio creates unparalleled quality, but it's computationally expensive. The simplest way to use an HRTF is to process a sound source to make it appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 locations we sample. Unfortunately, the processing has to be done in frequency domain rather than time domain, so there's multiple fast Fourier transforms needed for every sound source for every audio tick. That's a lot of multiplies. This computational complexity was the determining factor for our strategy. It meant we had to bite the bullet and design and build a custom hardware unit for 3D audio. Collectively, we're referring to the hardware unit and the proprietary algorithms we run on it as Tempest 3D Audio Tech. The meaning of 3D audio and technology should be pretty obvious here. As for Tempest, I feel it really reflects our goals with audio. It suggests a certain intensity of experience and also hints at your presence within it. We're calling the hardware unit that we built the Tempest engine. It's based on AMD's GPU technology. We modified a compute unit in such a way as to make it very close to the SPUs in PlayStation 3. Remember when I said that they were ideal for audio? So the Tempest engine has no caches, just like an SPU. All data access is via DMA, just like an SPU. Our target was that it would have more power than a CPU, thanks to the parallelism that a GPU can achieve, and that it would be more efficient than our GPU, thanks to the SPU-like architecture. The goal being to make possible near 100% utilization of the CU's vector units. Where we ended up is a unit with roughly the same SIMD power and bandwidth as all 8 Jaguar cores in the PlayStation 4 combined. If we were to use the same algorithms as PSVR, that's enough for something like 5,000 sound sources. But of course, we want to use more complex algorithms, and we don't need anything like that number of sounds. It would have been wonderful if a simpler strategy, such as using Dolby Atmos peripherals, could have achieved our goals, but we wanted 3D audio for all, not just those with licensed soundbars or the like. Also, we wanted many hundreds of sound sources, not just the 32 that Atmos supports. And finally, we wanted to be able to throw an overwhelming amount of processing power at the problem, and it wasn't clear what any peripheral might have inside of it. In fact, with the Tempest engine, we've even got enough power that we can allocate some to the games, to the extent that games want to make use of convolution reverb and other algorithms that are either computationally expensive or need high bandwidth. But the primary purpose of the Tempest engine remains 3D audio. Now, 3D audio is a major academic research topic. It's safe to say that no one in the world has all of the answers. And the set of algorithms that has to be invented, tuned, or implemented to realize our vision for 3D audio is immense. For example, use of HRTFs in games is quite complex. Before, I talked about making a sound source appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 HRTF sample locations. But for high-quality 3D game audio, we have to handle other possibilities. The sound source might not be at one of the 1,000 HRTF sample locations, so we have to blend the HRTF data from the closest locations that we have sampled. The sound source might be moving, which needs very special handling as that blend keeps changing, and that can cause phase artifacts in the resulting audio. Or the sound source might have a size to it, meaning it should feel as if it's coming from an area rather than a single point. There's also whole categories of approaches to be handled. 3D audio can be implemented using individual processing of 3D sound sources. But alternatively, ambisonics can be used for 3D audio. Ambisonics being somewhat like the spherical harmonics used in computer graphics. And finally, there's audio devices. The player might be using headphones or TV speakers or have a higher-end surround sound setup with 6 or more speakers, all of which need different approaches. That's a lot of variations. It's nice to have the computational resources of the Tempest engine, but it's clear that achieving our ultimate goals with 3D audio is going to be a multi-year, step-by-step process. Having said that, headphone audio implementation is largely complete at this time. It was a natural place for us to start. With headphones, we control exactly what each ear hears, and therefore the algorithmic development and implementation are more straightforward. For TV speakers and stereo speakers, we're in the process of implementing virtual surround sound. The idea being that if you're sitting in a sweet spot in front of the TV, then the sound can be made to feel as if it's coming from any direction, even behind you. Virtual surround sound has a lot in common with 3D audio on headphones, but it's more complex because the left ear can hear the right speaker and vice versa. We have a basic implementation of virtual surround sound up and running. We're now looking at increasing the size of that sweet spot, which is to say, making the area you need to be in to feel the 3D effect larger, and we're also working to boost the sense of locality. Headphone audio is the current gold standard for 3D audio on PlayStation 5, but we're going to see what we can do to bring virtual surround sound to a similar level, after which we'll start in on setups with more speakers, such as 6-channel surround sound. It's now to the point where some of the PlayStation 5 games in development are extensively using these systems. One of the game demos allows you to toggle between conventional PlayStation 4 style stereo audio and our new 3D audio. I listened with just an ordinary pair of over-the-ear headphones, and wow, I could feel a difference. 3D audio has that dimensional feel to it. Conventional stereo audio feels smashed flat by comparison. The improvement is obvious. So, a big advancement, but have I entered the matrix? Does my brain believe I'm really there, like I was talking about earlier when I explained our target of presence? Well, the answer is no. But you've probably caught on to what's missing here, namely whose HRTF was being used. It wasn't mine, it was the default HRTF. The audio team analyzed the hundreds that they measured and chose the one they felt was the closest fit to the total game-playing audience. This shows a piece of the default HRTF on the left and my HRTF on the right. You can see that the general features are much the same, but the details are quite different. With the default HRTF, as I said, the 3D audio sounds pretty great. When I use my HRTF, though, the audio reaches a higher level of realism, which is to say that when using headphones and my HRTF, I occasionally get fooled and even think a sound is coming from the real world when it's actually coming from the game. A corollary to this is that there are a few people whose HRTFs are sufficiently far from the default HRTF, that's the red dot here, that they can toggle between PS4 style and PS5 style audio and not sense much difference. I've had a few people describe the PlayStation 5's 3D audio as sounding like a bit better stereo audio. Presumably they're the ones at the very edges of this diagram. Which means what HRTF you're using is key. I'd like everyone to be able to experience what I'm experiencing, but obviously it's not possible to measure the HRTF of every PlayStation user. That means HRTF selection and synthesis are going to be big topics going forward as the Tempest technology matures. At PlayStation 5 launch, we'll be offering a choice of 5 HRTFs. There's a simple test where you pick the one that gives you the best locality.
Oh, that's cool.
That's just the first step, though. This is an open-ended research topic. Maybe you'll be sending us a photo of your ear and we'll choose a neural network to pick the closest HRTF in our library. Maybe you'll be sending us a video of your ears and your head and we'll make a 3D model of them and synthesize
only
the
10
HRTF.
teraflops.
Maybe you'll play an audio game to tune your HRTF. We'll be subtly changing it as you play and home in on the HRTF.
I think we're going to have different
score, meaning that
modes to switch to, like Xbox does.
This is a journey we'll all be taking together over the next few years. Ultimately, we're committing to enabling everyone to experience that next level.
Like a basic power mode, and then we'll have probably a high performance
Hopefully,
power mode.
I've been able to illustrate a bit about our design and decision-making process today, and why PlayStation 5 has the feature set that it does. Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set. I'm hoping for the completely unexpected. Will it come from audio, ray tracing, the capabilities of the SSD, or something else? I guess we'll find out soon enough. Thank you for your time today.
They didn't even fucking show the silhouette of the damn console. No way. So this entire stream was explaining why we don't have as much teraflops as Xbox. I mean, regardless if it's not good or anything. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. All I see is F. I wasted 53 minutes of my life. Well, I do think the technology, the explaining of the technology is pretty cool. But I feel like it's a lot of that type of... You know when somebody tells you that this happened because of this, that, and that, or this is why I'm not as good as such, like why I'm not as good as basketball, because I have a messed up knee or my ankle, one leg grew out further or one leg is shorter. I feel like that's what this stream was about. I feel like this was, again, was the panic move by Sony, because Xbox release of an exclusive video saying like, look, like this is our console compared to a freaking refrigerator, and this is how it performs switching between 5 games fully running at one time. Even if it takes a couple seconds to switch between games, but like fully loaded, like high-end graphics, I think the Xbox, unless they show us some real world test, I think the same with Xbox again. If we see actual people, real consumers, besides Austin Evans and those people, hands on Xbox, I think the only time we'll really know if it's really powerful enough is when they come out. PlayStation is really playing the hand here. I feel like they won't announce a date until Xbox does, price, so on and so forth. How many flops does Xbox have? I thought I saw 12.5 teraflops on Xbox. Is what I want to say. Actually, here I can let's do a little something here. Let's do a little Google search. I'd rather buy a toaster than the PS5. Okay. So we're gonna go to Tech Radar. What's happening? Okay. Where were they talking about it? Okay. So yeah, 12 teraflops, like I thought. 52. So they only have 32 CEs. Granted, their clock speeds are higher, but I need to go back and rewatch this on how they have 12 teraflops. So, but damn, PlayStation has a lot more technologies that they're running in there. And again, with the custom RDNA 2, 3.8. You see, these are the two modes I was talking about. 2 cores. So if you run just basic console, probably doing Netflix, movies, music, it'll probably run at the 3.8. And when you're running games and stuff, or depending on the game and then the graphical settings, it'll probably be turning on the rest of those cores, the rest of those 6 cores, or 4, or however many cores they have. I need to rewatch that video. But I definitely felt like that stream was a why it's not as powerful type of thing. But I mean, that's just my opinion. I'll probably see what some of the people that I watch their opinions are, and see if they feel kind of the same way. I feel like we got rickrolled. I mean, maybe. I mean, granted, I didn't understand fully of everything what he said. I got the main gist of it. but I still feel like, again, this is, you know, why I'm not as good as the other guy type of thing. But I mean, I'm gonna buy it regardless because I want the new consoles. The new consoles are better than the previous ones we have. And probably years down, like a couple years down the road, we'll probably see newer, higher end versions of those. You say PS5 master race, yeah. It has 45,000 dislikes. So yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. We'll see. Everyone, is it on Twitter actually? Is it trending on Twitter? Let's see Twitter's Oh look, here's the first meme of the day. There are no trends? Scam just for our precious time. There it is. There it is. Okay. Let's see what everybody else is saying. Yeah, here we go. 5 minutes PS5 live stream. Oh yeah, I thought I heard talks about PS1, PS2, and PS3 backwards compatibility, but they didn't mention it. Only 100 PS4 games will work at launch. Fuck. No, the memes are here. Oh no. Oh no. Let's see. Damn.
Give me what I want. Give me what I want.
I feel like this is all of us. The PS3 and 4 are both more powerful. I wouldn't say they're both more powerful. I think the PlayStation is just. I think they're doing too much. That's why I'm confused. Yeah. I think we all learned that he needs to start an ASMR podcast.
Make possible near, and that it would be more efficient than our GPU thanks to the SPU-like architecture. The goal being to make possible near 100% utilization.
We got a science lesson, yeah.
We recognize that we have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived. We recognize.
I like that one. I like that one. That one's good. A photo of my ear. Then that, man, it's just 100 times faster than the PS4. That I think the load times, I think is what it might be best at, is maybe load times. It's. I know there's no action. Wait, was there actual no audience? Was it actually like a fake audience? Was it really? And the thing is also, their goal was minimum of at least 5 gigabytes per second, and they only reached 5.5. Granted, I don't know what Xbox is. Oh no. Getting a lecture by this guy. An overview in 20 minutes. They really released an overview about the whole stream. Yeah, the solid state drive is going to be really good. I mean, regardless if it's not as powerful, having the solid state drive is going to be amazing. Yep, see you like holiday 2020. No delay or anything. Yeah, 10.28 teraflops, 36 CUs. The fact it's not even a full 1 terabyte either, but granted, it's going to be the same as Xbox. The Xbox is not even going to have a full 1 terabyte, and they didn't even show the port or anything. They didn't show us anything. God dang it! Like the Series X is more powerful. Can someone translate from nerd? Wow, wow, wow. Like a church mass. Cyberpunk. Oh, that's going to be a good game. No context PS5 spoiler. Fucking potato. Coronavirus cures in this picture. It's pretty much one big science lesson, yeah, if you think about it. They changed his Wikipedia page. Oh. Oh. Oh dear. Bro, you can yeah, I'm just gonna stream Minecraft tonight. I'm figuring out why Sony's not giving us a PlayStation. Or showing us the PlayStation at all. Wow. Hey, he's trending. Talking about SSDs. Huh. No, it's just still same old survival. Same old, same old. But I need to do it on a Realm server. So that way I can put in certain things to avoid the hack. Scroll up. What? Oh, this? Knack isn't the top 100. It's Tyler. So literally, it's just the PlayStation event. It was... This was pretty crazy. I like this idea. It's literally... They literally use ASMR, I think, to figure out how to do this. Now, if Nintendo 6 console is more terrible, I'm going to commit suicide. Bro. Is there still not talks about a Switch Pro? Because if there is, like, I don't want to buy a Switch or a Switch Lite and be like, we're announcing the Switch Pro. I'm like, what the fuck? With Metroid Prime 4 bundled. If you buy it, you get all the Metroid Prime games in existence. I'm like, fuck. Me disappointed Marks didn't reveal the design. They have to. I don't see why they fucking changed his page. My God, Ice Age, baby. When Mark the Dead Space during. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about an HD trilogy. Wow. So I feel like I like how more people show up after the stream because like they just want to hear like somebody rant about it. I cannot believe they didn't show anything about they could have gave us a silhouette. Like leave us in suspense. Like this PR stunt that they're doing by not showing anything is pretty damn incredible. A Switch with actual power would be amazing. I think if they put a lot of power in a Switch, it's going to be fucking incredible. I want to explain what the heck an SSD is. He probably could do an ASMR channel. But I will say, I feel like I don't think I wasted an hour of my time. I feel like I'm more enlightened about what's happening. But like, if we do a Realms invite, that's gonna work. Okay, yeah, we're not doing Realms tonight. It'll probably be a while before we do Realms. I need to actually figure out what I want to do. I want to wait until they update to 1.16 for the Bedrock, so in case PlayStation can put in custom server codes. If they can, I'm just gonna do the custom thing. He doesn't even acknowledge PS5. Damn. Series on. Free waifu screensavers. So last gen 2013. Though they are massively, you know, even it's just even if it's not as good as Xbox Series X, you know, they are releasing 2 models. So I don't know. I don't know what the hell Sony's doing anymore. I thought the whole no yeah, no. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, there's supposed to be 2 PS5 models. The same with Xbox, lower end, high end. But now I'm wondering what the lower end model is going to be, or how bad the lower end model is going to be. Would it even be worth it? Because if you get the lower end model and if it already has 10 teraflops and the higher end, how does that work? I don't understand. I mean, if it already has less I don't know. I mean, if it's cheaper, I guess anybody would buy it at that point. You know, it's cheaper. This one's my favorite. This one's my absolute favorite.
We recognize that we have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived. We recognize
that's my favorite
that
one.
we have.
That's my absolute favorite one right now. But, man, tough times as a Sony fanboy. It's crazy. It's crazy. In the world. It's, I don't know. I don't have words anymore. Xbox Series X is supposed to run at 6K 300 FPS. It's supposed to run at 8K, probably 60 FPS. But I doubt that. I haven't even seen the new AMD stuff, so I wonder how RDNA 2, just the graphics cards alone, are how good they are. They say it can run 8K, so it could probably do 8K 30 on the nubs. Default dancing on the nubs. I've been bamboozled.
Have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived.
I love that one so much. AK-30 janky leg spike. Yeah, I think AK-30 would be like a freaking amnesia. Like you're actually just seeing amnesia just happen. My graphics card is the cheese wheel. My graphics card is, I think, honestly, how many teraflops does a 1660 Ti have? Let me see. I wonder if there's a way I can measure how many teraflops my computer has versus RDNA is amazing. Yeah, I really want one of the new ones. Let me see. I wonder, is there a way I can measure my teraflops? Oh, okay. So, yeah, so these new consoles are definitely way more powerful than my single graphics card. My graphics card is 5.5 teraflops. All right, but no, I just had to get deceived by Sony. Yep. So a 1660 Ti, my current card, I have the Gigabyte WindForce or whatever model it is. So I'm pretty much running a PS4 Pro. So what about the newer AMD cards? With the is it the RTX? No, not RTX. RX, right? The 50. Let's do the 5700. Let's look at the teraflops for that one. The 5700 is 7.9 teraflops. The XT model is 9.7. So, fuck, dude, these new consoles are more powerful. Yo, when are they going to pull out some new AMD cards? What do you mean? I didn't even realize they were that powerful. I knew they were good, but damn. Wait, how much is a 2080 then? It's 11.1. Oh, it's up from 10. Oh, the super. No, give me the fucking original one. Give me the original teraflops. $20? That's 20 teraflops? What? Does it really? So you want to recommend chapter subscribers in a basement? Oh god. Trap them all in a basement, dear lord. Minecraft basement. Damn. We have been bamboozled. So yeah, I think they shouldn't. They really should have waited. But I guess if damn, I don't know what Sony could do at this point now. So if they would have waited for, if they would have waited in summertime, right? They don't. They don't. I don't know. I'm trying to think in my head.
That we have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived.
It's just, it's so good. I love it. So if Sony came out like, look, we're not like right after this Xbox ordeal, they didn't do any press conference or anything or deep dive. Like, look, we're gonna wait until it, you know, it's coming near the launch date, and then they reveal everything, you know. But they don't give performance-wise stuff. I don't even know, that doesn't really make any sense now that I'm saying it. I don't know. I don't know. I'm actually really surprised that it's not as powerful, if not more powerful, because during the whole rumor of the mill stuff, you always heard PS5 being more powerful by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more teraflops, but that's clearly not the case. Granted, it's only 2.5 or 2.2 teraflops less powerful, but I feel like PlayStation has more going for it in terms of technology. But yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. The fact that I can only play almost. We have been bamboozled, led astray, and flat out deceived. And only 100 of the most played PS4 games at launch. So obviously the Dark Souls series, Bloodborne, Fortnite, fucking Apex, probably Call of Duty. What other games are on PlayStation? God of War, Horizon, Last of Us. I don't know, any Knack maybe, or is Knack not? No, Knack is not on that list. Yeah, I don't know. I thought I heard a rumor about PS1, PS2, and PS3 games. Does that mean no Minecraft? Probably it better be Minecraft. It's not clear what those 100 games are. Let's see. Actually, top. Let's see. So these are the top. Oh wow, people actually search these. People actually search these. What game is that? Life is Strange. Are they actually gonna go down the list? Tomb Raider's on PlayStation? I didn't know that. Okay, no, I don't wanna see all that. I just give me like the list. Just GTA. How could I have forgotten about GTA? So these are all the games. I don't count DLC. You shouldn't count DLC. GTA 6, yeah. FIFA, yeah. Dark Souls, Final Fantasy, Destiny. Yeah, probably should have figured Destiny. Fallout 4. I better not see 76 on the new consoles. We'll lose my shit. I want it to be in Hawaii. Battlefield 4. Does Battlefield 4 get more players than Battlefield 5? Oh shit, yeah. Tomb Raider Gone Home. It's crazy. Alrighty, guys. Is in it. Let's go. Yeah, of course Minecraft would be in. That's just crazy, man. Like,
That we have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived. We recognize
I love this.
that we
This
have
is
been
so good. As much as this guy talks so much crap, I love when he rants at some points because it's just so funny. We had like 5 games. Oh, PS5 launch better than PS4. Yo, PS4 launch and Xbox One launch sucked. There were no games. Alrighty, guys. Well, I guess that's it. We've all wasted enough time today. So for any new people here, if you like hearing my voice and you want to continue to hear it, go ahead and hit that subscribe and hit that like button. We're going to be streaming some Minecraft tonight. So Bedrock Edition. So if anybody plays on their phone, Xbox, PS4, PC, you can come and join us tonight. We'll be streaming at 7 o'clock. Cameron, appreciate that sub. I saw that pop up. There it is. Hey. Appreciate that sub, man. Welcome. But yeah, again, if you guys like hearing my voice and such, join us for Minecraft tonight. The way you said it sounded questionable. Really? What do you mean questionable? But yeah, that's gonna be it. We've all wasted enough time here today. So yeah, later tonight, 7 o'clock, 7:30. Just look for the event in the channels. Or a bit sus. Oh. So if you go to the channel, look for the new event. It'll say upcoming streams, or directly below the featured video. You'll see that upcoming event, and you'll see the time. So around 7:30 we'll start. No later than 8 o'clock for sure, and then we'll probably end around 10:30, 11 tonight. So again, I hope you guys have at least enjoyed yourself a little bit. But yeah, I'll see you guys tonight. And again, I'm just gonna play this again because I love it so much.
We recognize that we have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived. We recognize.
Yeah, right. I'll see you guys later. I'll see you guys later. Oh my god, this Sony thing has messed me up. 1v1. Why is everyone a 1v1 in Minecraft? I can't fight in Minecraft. I'll see you later, man. Bye.
Stars for my cubic game. I met a girl that day. She's the one controls the fate. I fell in love that day. I have to win her, have to win the game. Well, if you wanna win, you gotta pay. Let money pave the way. I win the game, I win her heart right away. She is fully on her way to love me date. And I hope to say goodbye to lonely days. My days, life's like a game. Everybody pays. Go for what we need, see what we teach, got what we made. Life's like a game. How much did you pay for your dream, for your soul and your life, Snorri stars for my cubic game. I met a girl that day. She's the one controls the fate. that day. I have to win her, have to win the game. Well, if you wanna win, you gotta pay. Let money pay the way. I win the game, I win her heart right away. She is fully on her way to a lovely date. And I hope to say goodbye to lonely days. My days, life's like a game. Everybody pays. Go for what we need, see what we teach, got what we made. Life's like a game. How much did you pay for your dream, for your soul and your life? The story starts from my cubic game. I met a girl that day. She's the one, controls the fate. I fell in love that day. I have to win her, have to win the game. Well, if you wanna win, you gotta pay. Let money pay the way. I win the game, I win her heart right away. She is fully on her way to a lovely date. And I hope to say goodbye to lonely days. My days, life's like a game. Everybody pays. Go for what we need, see what we teach, got what we made. Life's like a game. How much did you pay for your dream, for your soul and your life? Story starts from my cubic game. I met a girl that day. She's the one, controls the fate. I fell in love that day. I have to win her, have to win the game. Well, if you wanna win, you gotta pay. Let money pay the way. I win the game, I win her heart right away. She is fully on her way to a lovely date. And I hope to say goodbye to lonely days. My days, life's like a game. Everybody pays. Go for what we need, see what we teach, got what we made. Life's like a game. How much did you pay for your dream, for your soul and your life? The story starts from my cubic game. I met a girl that day. She's the one, controls the fate. I fell in love that day. I have to win her, have to win the game. Well, if you wanna win, you gotta pay. Let money pay the way. I win the game, I win her heart right away. She is fully on her way to a lovely date. And I hope to say goodbye to lonely days. My days, life's like a game. Everybody pays. Go for what we need, see what we teach, got what we made. on my Cuban game. I met a girl that